I'll start by describing the purpose of today's workshop, which is to discuss the in-stream flow provisions and the protection of VA base flows provisions from the October 2024 draft Bay Delta Plan. As Diane identified, these provisions are based on Alternative 5A and 6A from the September 2023 draft staff report with notable refinements which we will discuss. The workshop notice posed framing questions for discussion. First, should the State Water Board incorporate either of these provisions or other related provisions into the Bay Delta Plan? Second, are there other alternatives that the board should consider to avoid the need to modify minimum delta outflows and other water quality requirements during drought conditions? Lastly, if the board chooses to adopt the voluntary agreements or VAs, should the board include one of the two options identified in the draft plan or another option in order to protect the base upon which the VA flows are intended to be added from new water supply projects, including new water right applications and change petitions that may result in increased diversions from the Bay Delta watershed that could diminish additive VA flows? Related to this last question, I wanted to note that we did get a proposal from the Department of Water Resources on January 16th, 2025, that was sent to our email distribution list. DWR will be presenting on that recommendation in their presentation today. And this is just a note on terminology. This slide shows some common terms that will be used throughout the presentation. D1641 refers to State Water Board Decision 1641 that implements many of the provisions in the current Bay Delta Plan. Project or projects refers collectively to the Central Valley Project operated by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and the State Water Project operated by the Department of Water Resources. Term 91 refers to a standard water right term that is included in a small number of permits and licenses in the Bay Delta watershed that we will discuss in more detail later. TUCP refers to temporary urgency change petition to modify water right permit and license conditions, of which we'll specifically be referring to TUCPs to modify conditions imposed by D1641. Voluntary agreements, or VAs, refers to the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes proposal to update and implement the Bay Delta Plan submitted by the state and federal agencies and water users originally in March of 2022, with additional submittals following that date. First, we'll discuss the in-stream flow protection provision that was described in the draft updates to the Bay Delta Plan. I'll start by talking about the impetus behind the modular drought alternatives evaluated in the draft staff report and the specific possible provision that was described in the October 2024 draft Bay Delta Plan. These possible provisions were developed in order to help address challenges that have existed since the 1995 Bay Delta Plan was implemented with meeting flow-based water quality objectives in the Delta in drought conditions. Pursuant to State Water Board Decision 1641, the projects have primary responsibility for meeting Delta outflow and other flow-dependent water quality objectives in the current Bay Delta Plan. A limited subset of water right holders with standard water right term 91 in their permits also have bypass flow requirements we'll discuss in a little more detail later. But other water right holders do not have limits on their diversion to help meet minimum delta flow and water quality requirements when supplies are extremely limited. This can place significant burdens on the projects and their storage, leading to the submittal of temporary urgency change petitions to modify the terms and conditions of the project's water rights to reduce minimum delta outflow requirements and to allow for less water quality protections. Staff has developed possible methods to assist with avoiding this issue. The September 2023 draft staff report includes modular alternative 5A, which identifies that the board could include as a provision in the Bay Delta Plan a term 91-like approach to expand the number of water right holders contributing to meet existing Bay Delta Plan requirements. Standard water right term 91 is a term that's included in a small number of junior water rights in the Bay Delta Plan with priority dates of 1965 or later that requires curtailment of those rights at times the projects are releasing previously stored water to meet Bay Delta Plan requirements in order to avoid those diversions requiring more releases by the projects. Expanding term 91 to other water right holders would require complex data inputs about project deliveries to settlement type contractors that don't currently exist. Accordingly, staff explored other methods that could achieve similar purposes without these data issues. Staff developed the in-stream flow protection provision identified in the October 2024 draft Bay Delta plan as an alternative that could more easily be implemented than an expansion of Term 91, while achieving the similar purposes of improving the ability to meet existing minimum Bay Delta plan objectives during very dry conditions. The possible provision integrates with other proposed provisions in the draft plan. Specifically, the draft plan identifies that all water right holders would be required to curtail their diversions when no water is available at their priority of right, regardless of voluntary agreements. Building on this concept, additional curtailments would be added during critical water years and declared drought emergencies that would require the bypass of base delta outflows in order of water right priority, making the base delta outflows unavailable for diversion. This provision would be implemented using the implementation methodology for the Bay Delta plan. The projects would still have initial responsibility for bypassing natural and abandoned flows to meet the objectives, but if more water was needed, other water right holders would also need to bypass natural and abandoned flows, reducing the need for projects to release previously stored water and the need for TUCPs and impacts to cold water storage and project reservoirs. This slide describes these base delta outflows that would be required to be bypassed as part of this provision, which includes the base delta outflows identified in Table 3 of the Bay Delta Plan and D1641 that range from 3,000 CFS to 7,100 CFS. These flows include minimum flows needed to prevent seawater intrusion, which range between 3,000 CFS and as much as 5,000 CFS or more, as well as some minimal fisheries protection flows during critical water years and drought periods to the extent those flows are not off-ramped due to the dry conditions. However, this does not include requirements outside of very dry conditions or higher flow requirements included in Table 4 of the current Bay Delta Plan in D1641.